College enrollment for men and women changed at different periods in time due to varying historical events. For instance, look at the difference in enrollment between 1940 and 1950, when the GIs came home from World War II. It's also interesting to note that since the 1980s, the majority of students have been female, but that women still only earned comparatively less than men. Is there any common factor in the two discrepancies that you can think of? We also know there are significantly higher proportions of Latino, Native American, and African American women that are attending college. A higher proportion of these female minority groups than whites or Asians, which historically overall have had a larger percentage of students enrolled in college. The text author begs the question of whether men should have affirmative action programs for them, since there are less men in college than women. At the same time, researchers find that men are underperforming academically, at least just based on grades. If men are the minority on campus, there may be merit to the idea that there should be men's support services, just as there are for women. There have been significant changes in the proportion of professional degrees awarded to women since the 1970s. As you can see, very few women were awarded professional degrees in the 1970s. Only 1% of dentistry, 5% of law, and 8% of medical degrees were awarded to women in the 1970s, compared to slightly less than half for each profession by 2014. Current issues that are being debated now are the pay gap and the glass ceiling. The pay gap is referring to the difference in pay between men and women, and the glass ceiling is referring to an invisible barrier that seems to prevent women and minorities from reaching the top levels of corporate rankings. The glass ceiling appears to be cracking, though it still operates to diminish opportunities. And there are ongoing concerns about sexual harassment and how to deal with that. There is a huge shift now with the emergence of the Me Too movement in recent years. We'll look at some of these issues in the next few slides. This graph shows the change and the steady increase of women in the workforce for the past 100 years. At the turn of the century, only about 1 in 5 workers were women, as compared to the last several decades, where almost half of all people now working are women. There is very little change that is expected to happen in the next several years. It's also interesting to see how different areas of the country have different levels of women in the workforce. It appears, looking at the states that have the fewest women in the workforce versus the most, that there's a geographical distribution of less women in the workforce in the southern states, as opposed to more women in the northern states. Another pattern is that the states are clustered to some extent. Both patterns may be due to cultural ideas about whether a woman being in the workforce is desirable or not. The pay gap may also be thought about relative to education. The least difference in pay gap is with high school dropouts, and the greatest is seen in the associate's degree level. While gains have been made in the pay gap, it's far from equal. In the 1960s and the 1970s, women made 60% or less relative to men. While there have been some improvements, women are still at about 74 cents on the dollar to men. One area of recent studies, which is particularly important for women in college right now, is the research that's being done on starting salaries. It appears that either men are better at negotiating beginning salaries or that their negotiations are taken more seriously. Understand that the first offer that you get for a job is often not the full salary that some employers will pay. Negotiating is a skill, and it can help to read books on how to engage in it, and even role play with a partner when you get to the point of negotiation, so that you're ready to discuss it with your potential employer. Once you're in the workplace, be sure you track your accomplishments so you can make your supervisor aware of them and assure that they understand exactly how big your contributions are. One of the reasons that the glass ceiling still exists is due to stereotypes about women regarding them being the primary caretaker in the family and their obligations to maintain the home. Another reason is that there are not as many women at the top level of management, so then there's a lack of mentors, and often it's the mentor that is the person that can provide the opportunities to develop leadership skills.